Hello everyone, welcome to the latest in my top 10 tips videos for beginners, this time looking at the F-86 Sabre. As with all of the videos in this series, this is designed to give a few tips that I've noticed when trying to learn the Sabre, and are really 10 things I wish I knew before going on to my first multiplayer session. So these aren't absolute basics, I won't be covering any of the kind of tutorial of how to get the plane started, equally not going into anything too advanced, really just aimed at something that you can look at just before taking the Sabre out for the first time in multiplayer. And also this guide is going to be focusing from the point of view of Enigma's Cold War server, so the tips will mostly apply there, but they can also apply to other areas. So anyway, let's get on with the video. So the first few tips have all to do with things that we can do right here on the ground during startup. The first thing is that your speed brakes in the Sabre start fully deployed, which is a big problem because there is no in-cockpit display about the location of your speed brakes or your flaps. Flaps are fairly easy, you can actually see them from the cockpit, but you can't see the speed brakes. So just get into the habit during startup to make sure that you've pushed speed brakes up to fully retract them. Once you've done that, you can then put that back into the neutral position and you'll be absolutely fine to fly from there. Second tip then is with your radar. Now you can use the radar in the Sabre, it will auto-lock on anything in front of it, and if you uncage the gyro you can get a radar gun sight. But honestly it's not that useful, mostly I just use the gun sight in its caged position. The guns are really fast firing, really high velocity, so you don't really have to worry. The main problem having your radar on does though is it gives people alerts, gives them a nasty RWR tone because you are locking them, and that can really spoil any surprise attacks that you do. Now there is no radar off, instead this little dial here, what we can do is turn this all the way to the minimal position. I suggest binding a key to do this for you, and at the same time I also like to put the wingspan indicator on minimum just to make our reticule as small as possible. But once the radar is on minimal range, this effectively turns it off, and so no more nasty RWR pings spoiling your perfect ambush. And the final one is a little bit of an odd one. I have never before given a tip as to what livery you should use, but in the Sabre I strongly suggest that you go with the Skyblazers team. The reason for this is unmistakably an American plane. There is no way you can mis-ID this thing that is covered in stars and stripes, and the problem you will find flying the Sabre on Enigma's Cold War is you will routinely get mis-ID'd as a MiG-15. Now yep, that is totally on that other plane that is coming in. They should do a proper check. There are various ways of telling the difference between a Sabre and a 15, but you're still the one who's going to be paying the price if someone gets confused and shoots you down. Since I've been running with this colour scheme, I have never once been mis-ID'd. I would suggest anyone who did get confused about this colour scheme get their eyes checked over. So now you're off the ground and you're heading into combat, so how should you be fighting? Well, the main rule of the Sabre is turn. You can outturn effectively anything on the server, with the one exception of the MiG-15. With the MiG-15 you become the boom and zoom fighter, you need to use energy tactics. For absolutely anything else you can 100% rely on just outrating them. This makes this plane a turn fighter's dream and is really quite easy to pick up because of that. Just go for the turn. Now to enhance the previous point, with this definitely use your flaps. treat this very much like a World War II prop plane. When you get into a long turning fight, you're going to bleed off speed. When you feel it bleeding off, deploy your flaps. That makes a really good turn fighter even more amazing, as well as allowing you to out-slow fight pretty much anything else that you can come across. Do note there is no in-cockpit flap indication, so do just keep in mind that you've lowered the flaps, or get used to checking on your wings and visually identifying if they're lowered or not. Now, turning is probably the most obvious tactic in the Sabre, but you should also note that this thing can get really fast. What it is not good at is acceleration, and pretty much anything has more thrust-to-weight ratio than you, unless it's a helicopter. But given enough time, the Sabre can go outstandingly fast, especially if it's dropped its fuel tanks. This is especially true in a dive, and you can catch some MiG pilots really unawares just by how fast you can go, how much you can keep up with them. Now, one caveat to that last point is when you find yourself going very fast, say if you've been in a very long tail chase, do not try and pull negative G. This plane absolutely can turn down at incredibly high negative AOA, but doing so at high speeds will make your pilot black out. You can black out incredibly quickly in the Sabre, and by the time you recover, you're normally in the ground and exploded. So when you're flying very fast, make sure you're never pushing the nose down. Even small twitches can send you into the ground. So far I've really been singing this Sabre's praises. It's incredibly easy and nimble to fly. Its downsides have to do with its armament, and its guns in particular are very, very weak for the Cold War. It is armed with 6 50 cal forward-firing machine guns, giving you the same damage output as a P-51, and you really feel this on the server. You're not going to be killing anything with a couple of hits. Instead, you need multiple sustained bursts, ideally into critical sections, in order to bring down planes. This is especially true for tough targets like Heinz and Su-25s. That said, these guns do still work. They are very easy to aim because of their high velocity, and so you can put a lot of rounds on target. What you'll often find is you'll slowly needle down planes. So stick with it, do not discount the guns, they do work, just don't expect miracles from them. Now, the other air-to-air armament on the Sabre is the missiles, and unfortunately these are just really AIM-9Bs, and so you shouldn't expect much from them really. Just like the F5 on the Caucasus map when it's running with AIM-9Bs, these don't track very well, they're not particularly fast, they can't turn particularly well, they're easily distracted by things like the sun. Now, you can still use them, but my rule of thumb is if I am in any doubt whatsoever that the missile is going to hit, I don't fire the missile. Now, that last tip's not to say the missiles are useless, more they're just used for one particular aspect, and that is when a target starts to pull away. What you will very often find when fighting in a Sabre is players will turn with you at first. Very often pilots will get cocky and still try and outturn a Sabre. However, most pilots will notice that they're losing that fight and try and disengage. Now, that is where you want to use your missiles. As they straighten out to disengage, that is when you can fire a missile at them. They will be at low speed, having just been in a turning engagement with you. They will be moving nice and straight, trying to extend away, and that is where these missiles work, punishing players for leaving the fight. And this is why I'm really hesitant to use my missiles in any other circumstances, just because they are so useful and that situation comes up so often in the Sabre. So save your missiles so that you have them when you really need them. So yeah, those are the top 10 tips for beginners that I have for the F-86 Sabre. If you have any other tips, or if you disagree with any of the ones that I've posted, please do leave a comment down below. I've had some really excellent tips on previous videos, and I'd love to see what you all think about the Sabre and what their tricks there are with using it. Otherwise, I hope to catch you in a future video. Until then, remember to be kind to yourselves and everyone else. Cheers.